our tournament. Obzon Reanimator versus Sultai Control. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, of course, Nick Miller in the sideboard, and the rest of the SCG Live crew will be bringing you 9 rounds today, 9 rounds tomorrow, and we appreciate you guys joining us as the Sandsep Citadel will kick things off here from Miami.
I was watching Matt Linde yesterday in the grinder, fell a little bit short of getting 2 buys. Jerry Thompson upended him.
Oh, that wily Jerry T. Linde with Llanowar Waste is his second land. He will play what might be the most powerful card in Standard. It's going to turn over a Siege Rhino, Llanowar Waste, a Sandsep Citadel, and a Whip of Erebos. So Linde will have some options here of what he does want to choose. Woodsader Wayfinder. We saw Escalante just start off with a Temple of Deceit.
Now, the Abzan Reanimator deck is playing Wayfinder for a variety of reasons. Some of it is Delve, and as you see, Whip of Erebos here as well. Anytime you flip over something big in your graveyard, you have Whip of Erebos, get it back somewhere down the line. Another kind of free synergy that this deck gets to incorporate.
Temple of Malady here from Escalante. Top card's going to go to the bottom from the scry. He'll follow up with a Thoughtseize in just a moment, it seems. And he will. So it's time to take a look at Linde's hand. Linde will show a Sandsep Citadel, 2 copies of Thoughtseize, a Murderous Cut, and looks to be a Sylvan Caryatid here. So not the most powerful hand we've ever seen.
Yeah, a little bit light on action right now. Not a lot going on here, but Linde with a lot of powerful draws from here.
Caryatid very quickly selected from the Thoughtseize. That'll go to the graveyard. We'll head back Linde's way. He'll take a draw step here. It's a copy of Hero's Downfall. It's time for him to cast a Thoughtseize, so he wants to see what Escalante is up to. And we'll take a look at Roby's hand, and we'll see a couple Planeswalkers there in Kiora and Ashiok, along with 2 copies of Sultai Charm, and then 2 copies of Llanowar Waste.
So given the nature of Robbie's hand here, it's a little odd that he would have selected Caryatid last turn. I assume that that selection indicated that he was really light on spells. He didn't care about getting hit with 2 copies of Thoughtseize, but his hand's very powerful, very stock right now, and these 2 Thoughtseizes are going to do very good work for Linde.
Linde going to take an Ashiok from Escalante's hand. Does not want to have to worry about that Planeswalker. The question is, will he cast his other Thoughtseize? Kiora, not much of a problem at this point, as Linde does have a copy of Hero's Downfall. He'll play a Sandsep Citadel, swing across for 1, and that will be Linde's turn. So we're going to head back Escalante's way. He'll take a draw step. It's another copy of Sultai Charm. Very powerful card in this metagame right now, especially against your red-white aggro deck, because it kills all the creatures in that deck.
It's very, very flexible. Also can kill Chain of the Rocks. Is that something your deck's in the market for? Not the Sultai Control deck very much, but again, Charms typically very flexible, and this one no different. Now, a very subtle play from Matt last turn, not Thoughtseizing, because Robbie didn't have anything in his hand to do for 3 mana that he could disrupt. There's multiple copies of Sultai Charm. So waiting 1 more turn to give Robbie a draw step, maybe to find something better than what was already in his hand.
Linde will serve in here for 1. Escalante's going to go down to 16. Does have a land to play in a forest if you'd like. You mentioned the Thoughtseize. That's still in Linde's hand. Also has a copy of Murderous Cut, but that one's pretty dead in this matchup. Now it's time for Sultai Charm. This will be the old catalog.
Exactly.
Draw 2, discard 1.
So another really nice play here from Linde. Instead of casting the Thoughtseize here, he knows that Robbie's going to cast a Sultai Charm at the end of the turn because he got nothing else going on. And he thinks the most likely scenario is that Robbie's going to untap and cast Kiora. Then Linde can use Hero's Downfall. Untap and Thoughtseize Robbie after he's looked at a variety of new cards. So Linde's showing a lot of patience with this Thoughtseize, trying to wait until Robbie's seen the maximum number of cards so he can hopefully get the best selection.
Hero's Downfall and Opulent Palace were the draws off of Sultai Charm, so Escalante needs to discard something from his hand. You see he is still deciding, as his hand is pretty loaded at this point. He's going to discard a Sultai Charm. He will untap. It's time to take a draw step for his 4th turn. It's another copy of Opulent Palace, so lands will not be an issue.
I think Linde may hold off on this Thoughtseize yet again here if Robbie doesn't play the Kiora. Now with an untapped land number 4, it seems pretty attractive.
Escalante has brought Kiora forward in his hand, so certainly considering that as an option this turn. And what's on a relatively empty board, I'd be surprised if he doesn't play it, as he is reaching for 4 mana at this point. So there is the Crashing Wave.
And this works out perfectly for Linde. The Hero's Downfall gets to be used here. Linde gets to untap and cast his Thoughtseize, with Robbie having looked at a bunch of new cards.
So Kiora will come in. Starts on 2. You have to imagine it will move up here in just a moment to 3, and it does. And that'll be targeting the Satyr Wayfinder. And there's your Hero's Downfall to take care of the Planeswalker. Linde will very quickly untap. He'll take a draw step here, and it's a copy of Tasigur.
Well, that is a perfect draw to pair with this Thoughtseize. Now, Roby probably with a variety of removal spells, but this may open up the coast here.
Take a look at the hand. 2 copies of Opulent Palace, a Sultai Charm, and a Hero's Downfall. Linde going to take a look at Sultai Charm. Wants to see what all 3 modes are of that card. Of course, destroy target artifact or enchantment. You can catalog with it, draw 2, discard 1, and then kill a monocolored creature.
Yep. Ultimate price, naturalize, catalog. Those are the modes. And much the same recipe here that you see with Abzan Charm, which is a big player in Standard. A very flexible removal spell. And in the event that your opponent's playing nothing to the board, there's an out of drawing some cards.
We mentioned Linde in his Team Pro Tour win, and of course, his Nationals win many moons ago. He's going to be very careful to read these cards and make sure he knows exactly what they do.
Yeah, I do not know how much Magic Linde plays currently, but better safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
He was doing a lot of reading in the trial last night.
Here comes an attack for 1 from the Satyr Wayfinder. Last turn, of course, it didn't attack because of the Kiora activation, so no damage missed there from Linde, just no reason to attack. Now that he's drawn a 5th land, that's actually a pretty potent draw because now he can play a Swamp, play Tasigur, delve away, and then have enough mana to actually activate Tasigur.
Exactly. Now, you know, Linde knows that this Tasigur is not long for this world, so he wants to at least wait until he has 5 mana so he can play the Tasigur and activate in 1 turn.
And whenever someone's reaching for their graveyard in this format, that means they've drawn a delve spell.
And thus far, Tasigur has been the multi-format all-star of this set. It's been very, very good in Modern, in Legacy, and in Standard.
Linde has left behind a Thoughtseize and a Siege Rhino. So those are the cards that he is interested in recouping with Tasigur potentially. Of course, with the activation, 2 more cards will be turned over, so could change some things. Escalante is already reaching to cast a Hero's Downfall, and Linde says, I'll activate Tasigur. So the 2 cards will be turned over, a Courser of Crufix and a Hornet Queen. Not too bad.
Yeah, none of these are bad consolation prizes here.
Escalante is going to very quickly give Linde back the Thoughtseize, which I'm sure Matt doesn't mind too much, and will head back Escalante's way. He draws a Thoughtseize of his own. We'll play a copy of Opulent Palace. But for Roby, he's not underneath very much pressure at this point as he's going to cast a Thoughtseize, get a better look at Linde's hand. Linde will show Thoughtseize and Murderous Cut. Thoughtseize will go to the graveyard. Cut will be the card left over. So if you're Roby, you're probably okay with this situation because all it takes is 1 dig through time to kind of really power through this.
Exactly. At this point, you know, Matt's a little bit ahead on the board. He's got a 1-1 against nothing. And he's got some powerful draw steps as well, but Roby has way more power in his deck. You see Ugin here a little bit of ways from being able to cast that, but Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time, those are all really powerful draws right now.
And we were wondering if Satyr Wayfinder is the most powerful card in Standard. Well, it's dealt a lot of damage this game, so things are going pretty well for that little 1-1. Here is Courser of Crufix. Take a look at the top card here in just a moment. It's a copy of Temple of Silence. That'll come into play. Courser will trigger. Linde will go up to 17. Time to scry. Satyr Wayfinder, the top card. It'll become the bottom card from the scry. So now we'll see a new card, which is a copy of Hero's Downfall. And Linde will pass the turn back over to Escalante. Escalante going to tap some mana. It's time for a Hero's Downfall to take care of that Courser. And we'll head back Robbie's way. Draws a copy of Kiora, which at this point, Linde does not have an answer to.
Yeah, Downfall on top, but
there is the Kiora. So now it makes you wonder, because the Downfall is on top, it looks like actually he has a Downfall in hand, how Escalante wants to use this. It's an expensive way to cycle a card, 4 mana.
That's fine, though. I mean, I think that it's okay to just draw a card here, especially with Ugin in hand. But it looks like Robbie's just going to try to force the Downfall here. Hopefully free up the Ugin. Now, Linde with a 2nd Downfall in hand, so this line of play is not going to work out that well for Roby, but he's still in a position where he has a lot of really big draws.
Here's Downfall, take care of that. Satyr Wayfinder is probably just going to hang back yet again due to that Kiora activation. And we're going to head back Escalante's way. He'll take a draw. It's a copy of Crux of Fate.
Probably a little early to be snapping that one off.
A smidge. A smidge. Here's an attack for 1. Sometimes you get fed up with these attacks for 1, though, man.
So the Satyr Wayfinder, not a dragon.
Yeah.
It's not a dragon.
Enough is enough with the Satyr Wayfinder. Linde's going to leave that card on top with Temple of Malady. Disdainful stroke the draw. We'll go back Linde's way. See what this draw step's going to be. There's an attack for 1. Escalante down to 8. It looks like Tasker was the draw. The question is Linde willing to cast it at this point? Has to wonder, what the heck is in my opponent's hand? He's not doing anything.
Well, you could definitely guess spot removal.
That's a fair guess.
you know, your opponent still doesn't have to kill this Wayfinder. I mean, once we talk about getting to 6 life to 3 life, then Siege Rhino triggers really can start adding up here, but I think it's reasonable to anticipate your opponent has some way to kill it. So at this point, Linde's probably just trying to set up the graveyard as best as possible to get 1 activation out of Tasker with the highest possibility of getting a high impact card.
Here's Tasker. The cards left in the graveyard: Hornet Queen, Tasker, Hero's Downfall, Siege Rhino. Disdainful Stroke will add a Tasker to the graveyard. We'll go back Escalante's way. Bile Blight the draw.
Now this he might be willing to cast on the Seder Wayfinder because there's not that many targets in Linde's deck for this thing. And the life total is becoming an issue.
He's willing to take at least 1 more point. Escalante down to 7. That's a Polluted Delta. That's land number 7. And it looks like he's willing to sacrifice this. So an island or a swamp coming here for Escalante as he goes down to 6. And it will be an island.
So 6 is one of the important flashpoints, as now it means 2 Siege Rhino triggers are lethal. Not that Linde has them, but this game is shaping up to be something that will go on for a very long time. So I think Roby is getting to a point where sooner rather than later, I think he needs to use a removal spell on this Wayfinder. I actually think it should have been last turn, but I don't think he wants to take too many more hits from this.
He will just pass the turn back. Linde will take a draw step. It's a copy of Thoughtseize. Here's an attack for 1. Escalante going to take another point of damage. He's going to go down to 5. Linde will cast the powerful discard spell. He'll get the opportunity to see what Escalante is working with. One of these cards, rather good. In Ugin the Spirit Dragon, along with Bile Blight and Crux of Fate. Decisions here for the former national champion, but he will go with Ugin.
Yeah, you can see Matt's, facial expression. He can't cut Roby off a removal spell, and Ugin's definitely the most powerful thing going on.
Yep.
So he's trying to figure out some fancy way to maybe strand Roby with a removal spell or whatever, but just the easiest thing to do, get the Ugin out of the hand.
Bile Blight took care of the Seder Wayfinder. You saw the draw step last turn for Escalante. Was the 8th land. It was a swamp. He put that into play and passed the turn back. Linde with the Windswept Teeth. He'll pass the turn back. Polluted Delta will come into play. Linde's going to sacrifice his Windswept Teeth. So there's a Plains. Beta, am I correct?
Beta, beautiful. You can tell Linde's been
had
around for a long time.
Yeah, Linde's probably had these for a while.
Were these the same planes from his Nationals win?
Ooh,
not
boy.
sure. Probably not.
Temple of Malady, the draw. We'll take a look at the top card here, will Linde. It'll become the bottom card. Not happy with what he saw. Pass the turn back. Again, for this situation here for Escalante, a lot of big draws available. He just hasn't found any of them yet.
Yeah, Linde has a Planeswalker checked, so those don't really qualify, but any of his card drawers, and now dig through time the draw step
There
here.
we
That's
go.
what he was looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking for one of those blue card draws. You mentioned 4 digs and 2 treasure cruises in his deck. He's finally found one. Here's a temple from Linde. That card's going to the bottom as well.
Now, it's not a guaranteed win at this spot. There's still a lot of draw sets to be had, and it's possible to even miss a big spell from Dig Through Time, but this is really the card that Roby was looking for.
So for Escalante, it's time to take a look at the top 7 and take 2 with him. You have Myakos, Disdainful Stroke, a Treasure Cruise, another dig, a Bile Blight, a Crux of Fate, and an Opulent Palace. Those are the choices here. 2 blue card drawers there.
Yep. Though I think the most likely scenario is that Roby takes 1 card drawer plus the Disdainful Stroke, because at this point he's really worried about Siege Rhinos. He's potentially worried about Whip of Erebos, so I think he's going to only take 1 of the card drawers, take the Disdainful Stroke now to lock up a lot of Linde's most powerful draws.
You have Myakos, the draw step for the turn. That'll come into play. Escalante will pass the turn back. A Windswept Teeth, the draw here for Linde. He'll deploy that and simply pass the turn back. Linde's past couple of draw steps have not been great. Escalante finally found a drew a blue card drawer, excuse me. Linde's going to sacrifice a Heath here. And that's where this deck really kind of moves into overdrive, when it's able to chain together those card drawing spells.
We talked about earlier in the broadcast here, when you're playing against a deck like Obzon, you have the option of going underneath or over the top. Sultai is one of the decks that's trying to go over the top, and one of the primary ways to go over the top is with cards like Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time.
Linde's finally drawn a spell, which could maybe chain him into another one. It's a copy of Commune with the Gods. Escalante going to take a look. Linde will be revealing the top 5 cards of his library. You can put an enchantment or creature in. Well, Veribos is a hit. Reclamation Sage is 2. And Linde going to very quickly select Whip of Veribos.
Now, there is a one-of hanging out in Linde's deck that can push him through the situation. The game's getting away from him a little bit, is the Soul of Innistrad. Very powerful, it resolves, and if it gets countered, that's fine too.
Now, is Linde willing to deploy the Whip? It looks like he's waiting. Escalante is going to play another Dig Through Time here. So top 7 cards here. Satyr Wayfinder, another Dig, a Swamp, a Temple of Malady, a Hero's Downfall, and an Ashiok.
So this is a small thing, but still significant. I think that Roby should just be paying full retail for these Dig Through Times. He's unlikely to find something that he wants to cast at the end of the turn, and the cards in your graveyard are essentially mana for future delve spells. And somewhere down the line, Roby's mana might be taxed. He might be trying to chain together multiple spells. So I think in spots like that, you just pay the full 8, leave your graveyard intact, and exploit it somewhere else down the line.
Sultai Charm, the draw step here for Escalante. Does have Ashiok here. So a lot of options here for Roby. Looks like he will go with the Nightmare Weaver to start. That'll exile 3 cards. Temple of Silence is 1, Hornet Queen is 2, Siege Rhino is 3. So the creatures will stay with Ashiok. The Temple will be exiled in its own little pile.
This card, essentially Gerard Fabiano's calling card, plays it across all formats. Very potent in mid-range matchups that involve creatures, particularly the 4-mana ones. Siege Rhino matchups, this card's quite good.
Absolutely. Now Linde has actually considered using the Hero's Downfall on this. And there are quite a few powerful Planeswalkers in this Sultai control deck, so those Hero's Downfalls in certain situations can be taxed. We can't forget about the Banishing Light that's in Matt's hand, however. And it looks like he's going to go with that. A card that we haven't seen a ton of in Standard, but it looks like it's picking up a little bit for this tournament. Linde's got one. I've seen other players with one, too.
It's very interesting that this card has fallen off the radar because of its flexibility. Some of it's its vulnerability to enchantment removal. Some of it is the format has gotten a little bit faster in the face of red-white aggro, and 3 mana is a lot to pay for a removal spell that can get blown up. But this is a very potent card, and I think we're going to see plenty of it over the weekend.
You'll note that Linde is refusing to try to deploy this Whip of Erebos. He's waiting for a discard spell, something.
Yeah, he's trying. The Whip of Erebos is really his big way to steal this game. And so he's trying to wait for a spot where he either draws a Thoughtseize or another powerful card to pair with it. Try to do everything in one turn because he knows if he runs the Whip of Erebos out there, it's just going to get countered or blown up.
Sultai Charm took care of the Banishing Light, so Hero's Downfall will take care of the Ashiok. Escalante will draw a card. It's a copy of Temple of Mystery, so that'll come into play very quickly. It's time to scry. Top card is moving to the bottom. Escalante will just pass the turn back over to Linde. Linde will draw a copy of Soul of Innistrad. That's the big one.
Yeah, that's the big one. I mean, you look at his graveyard, there's Hornet Queens and Siege Rhinos to get back. And even if the Soul dies or gets countered, you can still use its power wallets in the graveyard and reload. This was the one card, besides Whip of Erebos resolving, this is Linde's best path to get back in this game.
Well, there is the big 6/6. Escalante's going to take a look and see, is this good news for me? The answer is no. This is absolutely bad news because even if Disdainful Stroke does take care of this, which I imagine it will, still going to get the value.
And this is one of those spots, the Souls were obviously supposed to harken back to the Titans of previous standards. They are on the balance much less powerful. This is a spot, though, where a Soul is significantly more powerful than a Titan. A Grave Titan would just get Disdainful Stroke, but the Soul of Innistrad is going to create all sorts of problems for Robbie, even if he has a counterspell at the ready.
There is a Disdainful Stroke to take care of it. Linde will deploy the Whip now. And that's in there. And that's just great patience from Matt.
Yes. Hey, he showed excellent patience even early on with the Thoughtseizes. Yeah. He knew what Robbie's curve was going to look like and played the game in such a fashion where he was going to get the most looks at the most valuable card in Robbie's hand. This Whip of Erebos that he found with the Commune, I think a lot of players would just cast it it would have gotten countered, but now it's resolved, and Roby has cast most of his Sultai Charms, so getting this card off the table is going to be really problematic for him.
There's Pluto Delta. And you can see Escalante's hand. It's not great. Crux of Fate. It looks like a couple copy of Hero's Downfall. So no answer to the whip right now. And certainly no answer to the Soul of Innistrad, getting creatures back.
And also, Roby's at 4.
Yep.
So he can't hold out for very long.
All those chip shots from the Wayfinder.
Yep, they all added up.
Whip is going to bring back a Siege Rhino on trigger. Escalante's down to 1. Lindy's going to go up to 16. It's time to move to the attack step. Escalante does have an answer. There's Hero's Downfall. That'll be exiled. We'll have to put that Siege Rhino from the graveyard into the exile pile. Now there's Courser, so we'll see the top card. Satyr Wayfinder is what it is. But we will get that game state updated for you guys here in just a moment so that Lindy cannot return that Siege Rhino again next turn. And there we go.
Yep. But still a lot of gas in Lindy's graveyard.
Absolutely. You see the amount of mana he has available. He can use Soul of Innistrad this turn if he'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a Crux of Fate, the old 1-for-1. I'll take care of the Courser. Then you're going to sacrifice his Windswept Teeth, as he does not want what's on top of his deck. No interest in drawing that card, so he can get a land out of his deck, assuming that he has one left, which he may not.
Yeah, it looks like he's out, but it's still a shuffle.
Mm-hmm. He's going to use the Soul of Innistrad here very quickly. Still needs to shuffle his deck from the Windswept Teeth, but he's going to get back 3 cards here and 2 Tassigers and a Hornet Queen. And now we're going to go back Lindy's way.
And the whip is still threatening lethal, on top of all the stuff that go back. I mean, at this point, even the Satyr Wayfinder requires a removal spell.
There's your whip activation. See what Lindy wants to bring back. He'll go with Satyr Wayfinder. This will turn over a couple of cards here. He wants to get more ammo in the graveyard to find something like that.
Yep.
Siege Rhinos. He's found 2 of them.
So now the whip is definitely lethal next turn.
And now this also forces Escalante to use a Hero's Downfall on a Satyr Wayfinder that's been brought back via whip. Now the Hornet Queen's going to come down. And Escalante's out of cards, so he's going to need one heck of a draw step.
Yeah, he's got to find Treasure Cruise into something to answer the Hornet Queen and something to answer the Whip of Erebos, and then still beat the next wave of action in Matt's hand. Seems very unlikely.
So there's Hornet Queen along with his insect friends. Well, Treasure Cruise was the necessary draw, as you mentioned.
Step 1.
But this also kind of harkens back to the point you made where, you know, he would rather cast that Dig Through Time much earlier for just 8 mana. So he can maybe chain together multiple spells in one turn.
Exactly. It looks like it's not going to hurt him here because he has no answer to the Whip of Erebos, so it's all boundary. But you can imagine, you know, he draws more Dig Through Times, more Treasure Cruises. At some point, the size of his graveyard does come back and matters. But it looks like that's not going to be a factor here, as Whip of Erebos should mop this game up momentarily.
Crux of Fate's going to play cleanup duty on Hornet Queen and the insects. Opulent Palace will come in. Last card in hand for Escalante is a Bile Blight. But Lindy's going to be able to return a Siege Rhino here, get his trigger. And that's going to put a close on game number 1 here, as Matt Lindy is going to win game number 1 over Robbie Escalante. Abzan Reanimator up a game here over Sultai Control. Nothing short about these games, that's for sure.
Yeah, you had to really settle in because there's a lot of removal in these 2 decks. They don't kill particularly quickly, but Lindy did a great job of navigating that game. I thought he was basically done for when Robbie found the Dig Through Time, chained together another card drawer, but was able to time his spells in such a way to get Whip of Erebos to resolve. Robbie with no Sultai Charms to handle it, and at that point, Matt had just too much juice.
Well, we're going to head over to the sideboards here, and we will start with Escalante as he'll be on the play for game number 2.
He has a copy of Silumgar, the Drifting Death, 2 copies of Tassiger, Thoughtseize, 2 Drown Sorrow, 2 Freakish Cure, 2 Negate, 2 Disdainful Strokes, a copy of Silence the Believers, a Liliana Vest, and an Nissa Worldwaker. So the good counter spells and the flexible removal, I think, is the best things going on in this list. So for this matchup. So you're going to see the Silence the Believers, the Disdainful Strokes, the Negates. I think the additional Thoughtseize will come in. Very good chance the 2 copies of Tassiger comes in, assuming that Matt will cut most of his removal. I like Liliana Vest in this matchup. I'm not a huge fan of Nissa, but I can see both Planeswalkers coming in.
Other side of things here for Linde, he's got a Bile Blight, 2 copies of Crux of Fate, 3 Drowning Sorrows, a Reclamation Sage, a Banishing Light, a Glare of Heresy, 3 Nissa World Wakers, and a card I think is certainly going to come in, 3 Read the Bones.
Yeah, just more power is what Linde's in the market for. So the 3 copies of Read the Bones and the 3 copies of Nissa, those are the best cards in the sideboard. Past that, you get a couple fringe options. You may see something like Banishing Light come in here as additional protection against Planeswalkers, but I think the 3 Read the Bones and the 3 Nissas, those are the superstars for Linde in this matchup.
Well, these players are going to shuffle up here for game number 2. Like we said, nothing short about these games. And if you're playing a kind of a longer game in this sort of matchup, both these decks are playing black, and that actually makes me think of a new card from Dragons of Tarkir that actually kind of wants to play a longer game. There's a brand new Sidisi out there. It's actually Sidisi Undead Vizier. You can see this 5 mana 4/6 with Death Touch, and a new mechanic here, an Exploit. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice a creature. Maybe one of those Satyr Wayfinders, of course. When Sidisi Undead Vizier exploits a creature, you can search your library for a card, put it in your hand, and then shuffle your library. Game designer Patrick, what do we think of this thing?
I mean, it's definitely a potent card. There's already a bunch of standard decks that play something like Elspeth to generate tokens for free, or Satyr Wayfinder that synergizes very nicely with. Diabolic Tutor has showed up in standard decks for 4 mana, and this is 5 mana with a 4/6 Death Touch body attached, which is, that's not a small creature. Things like Tasigur, Siege Runner, they can't attack or attack through this or block. So this is definitely one of the most impressive cards I've seen out of the new set. There's a cap on how many 5 and 6 mana cards can really show up in decks at the same time because they're all competing with each other. So we've seen a lot of powerful 5 and 6 mana cards spoiled thus far. Only so many of them can really hit the mark and construct it because they're competing against each other. But I think Sidisi is one of the ones with a real shot. This is a very, very potent text box.
There's a lot that's going on with this card. It's very easy to just jump towards the Exploit and the Diabolic Tutor effect, but I think something very important that you mentioned, you take a look at the 4/6 Death Touch aspect of this card. Beats Siege Rhino, beats Tasigur, beats quite a few cards in the fight, honestly, which is really impressive to start with. And then the exploitability, I think, gets really interesting with cards like Satyr Wayfinder, tokens, of course, and we can't forget about maybe a little activation Whip of Erebos here.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of synergies with this card, and I think that a lot of its power level comes from flexibility, and often those cards don't read the best to people on first blush because they're not thinking of, oh, this is a game with a lot of variance and I'm going to just get into weird spots. But this is the type of card that over the course of 100, 200, 300 games is just going to come up where either the tutor effect is extremely powerful or a 4/6 Death Touch body for 5 is extremely powerful, or both.
And we have seen in these Abzan decks, a parallel to draw here is Liliana Vess with the tutor effect there. We have seen builds of Abzan play some one-ofs before. I think of Ari Lax winning Pro Tour Khans of Tarkir with his one of Dune Blast. And some other one of mass removal effects, maybe a one of Planeswalker. Ugin now, instead of having to play 2 of those, maybe just play 1 since you can more reliably find it. And that card, while it is on the same casting cost as Liliana, maybe you'd rather have the 4/6 than the Planeswalker.
Well, there's 2 big differences. Going to your hand versus top of deck is a huge difference.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, a 4/6 body is much better than not adding to the board in terms of attacking or blocking.
Sure.
Liliana Vess is a pretty big cost to put into play. You have to have the board pretty stable. A 4/6 Death Touch body does a lot of blocking and probably gives you the time to leverage whatever it is that you tutored for. So I think that Sidisi has a real shot of being a player in Standard.
I think we're going to see a lot of that card moving forward once it is released from Dragons of Tarkir. As both players taking a look at their opening hands right now, Escalante will be on the play here for game number 2. Tick-tock does go the clock. We've got about 21 minutes here for this game. As I mentioned, nothing slow about this particular, nothing quick about this particular matchup. The Temple of Malady will put the top card to the bottom as game number 2 is underway. Linde will mimic that play, but he'll keep his card on top. We'll go back Escalante's way for turn at number 2. Garruk Apex Predator the draw. Maybe a little early to the party for the big guy.
But I think you're going to see a lot of this sort of action going on between the 2 decks post-board where it's just find the most cards of substance, find the most high-impact stuff. So even though there's going to be a lot of 6 and 7 8 mana spells swinging around between these 2 decks, it's the nature of these matchups post-board.
A Garruk, a Crux of Fate, a Tasigur, a Sultai Charm, and then 2 copy of Hero's Downfall is what Escalante is looking at. Now, I think for Linde, it would be very easy to select that Sultai Charm and say, you know what, you're probably looking to use the catalog mode on that, so I'll take that. But is it that easy of a selection?
It's the most likely card to select out of this hand, especially with Linde having Whip of Erebos in his own hand. But I think Tasigur is potentially the card to take here just because the matchup goes on for a really long time and Tasigur is extremely potent.
Well, Linde is going to go with the Sultai Charm. He'll record the contents of Escalante's hand, and I imagine we'll see a second land here in just a moment. We do in the very powerful Evolving Wilds.
It's a 3-color mana fixer, and these decks are in the market to just put stuff in their graveyard for free in quotes. Now, Evolving Wilds has come up with a huge cost compared to something like Windswept Heath or Polluted Delta, which is the land comes into play tapped. But just getting more stuff into your graveyard for free when Tassicker and Murderous Cuts in your deck, it's worth paying that kind of cost.
Well, Linde will sacrifice to the Evolving Wilds. You saw Escalante looks as though he's missed his 3rd land drop. Linde going to go ahead and get a forest out of his deck. We'll see what the 3rd turn brings here from Matt. It does look like he has a copy of Courser in his hand. Llanowar wastes the draw step. Now here is Courser of Krufix. So we'll see the top card of his deck in just a moment. It's another copy of Llanowar Waste. We'll head back Escalante's way. 3rd land, very important here. It's kind of like a 3rd land instead of a Wayfinder.
It might be. We'll see.
We'll find out. There's Dig Through Time. There's a Wayfinder. There's Yavimaya and there's a Hero's Downfall. So Yavimaya will be added and directly placed into play. 3rd land has been found. We're going to head back Lindy's way.
And now you can see the synergy with Satyr Wayfinder and cards similar to it, and Tassicker. That Tassicker is ready to go.
Yep. Llanowar Waste will come into play. That'll trigger the Courser. Linde will gain a life. He'll come to the red zone here for 2. Now, one thing to keep in mind, even though Lindy's off to a great start here, you'll see his mana base. No white mana there just yet.
Although it appears no white cards in hand, so not really setting his development. He's got a lot of removal spells, but it is noteworthy. The Evolving Wilds there had to get a forest to enable Courser of Krufix, and now Lindy's still waiting for white mana.
Whip of Erebos is going to come into play. Linde will have to take 1 to cast it. And Ugin the draw.
Another big one.
A touch on the expensive side, yes. Escalante looking in his graveyard, eyeing that Tassiger. Perhaps it's time for the 4 or 5 to come into play.
I mean, part of this is the Tassigger's on top of Lindy's deck, so worried about a big tempo turn of Linde being able to answer the Tassiger and then play his own. Looks like Robbie just committed to downfalling this turn.
Windswept Heath will come in here. That'll gain Linde a life, of course. He's back up to 19. Courser's going to come into the red zone. Quick block there. Of course, Linde will gain a little bit more life because Whip is in play.
I think Robbie just trying to get another creature in the graveyard to facilitate his delve cards.
That's what it seems like. And Linde not willing to make a move. So here's a Hero's Downfall. Linde will sacrifice the Windswept Heath here. In response to the downfall.
And
which means he'll shuffle away the temple, he'll gain a life, and then we'll see a little bit of information.
just more patience here from Linde as well, which is great. Sense that his Tassiger was no good and is now, trying to wait to set up that Thoughtseize alongside Tassiger to get it resolved.
And of course, the earlier Thoughtseize is going to influence his decision a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for his troubles there, he does get the land off the Courser because Robbie was hoping to get the Tassiger that turn. And Linde's still with an opportunity to set up this Tassiger.
Ashiok the draw step here for Escalante. Escalante will have to take 1 to cast that. He'll exile a couple of cards here. Siege Rhino. Along with 2 lands in Temple of Silence and Windswept Heath. Now we'll see a Hero's Downfall.
And again, Linde's patience paying off so well here. He's going to get an opportunity to resolve this Tassiger and activate it. And even if Robbie untaps and responds with a removal spell, Linde, again, still generating some card advantage, getting some more stuff in his graveyard here for that Whip of Erebos.
That's the kind of game that he wants to play against this deck. Just kind of grind him down.
Yep. He's had opportunities here to be a lot more aggressive trying to capitalize on Robbie's early stumbles, but has shown a lot of patience here and now has an opportunity here to resolve a Tassiger, which has a chance to go unchecked here for several turns, given the nature of Robbie's hand.
And you see the hand that Escalante does have from this Thoughtseize, a Tassiger, an Ugin, a Garruk, a Crux of Fate, and a Silence the Believers. So if Linde does feel like selecting maybe Silence the Believers, that means Tassiger goes unchecked unless a healthy top deck there from Escalante. See, Linde does select the Silence the Believers, adds another card to his graveyard with the Thoughtseize, so he'll deploy a Llanowar Waste. And he'll have to pay 1 to play Tassiger, but I imagine he's okay with that. He's going to delve away quite a few cards.
So how do you feel about 1-mana 4/5s that have a really powerful effect if the game stalls out?
Huge fan.
Huge fan?
Huge
Okay.
fan.
What if they're legendary? You would still find room for it?
Still fine.
You'd still find it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Escalante going to take a long look at his hand. Hero's downfall was the draw. It was timely. I think he's forced to cast this. Yes, sir. So we'll get an activation. Couple cards turned over. Thoughtseize will go to the grip. But again, these kind of exchanges, that might seem minor. But again, you're just plus a card there.
Exactly. And especially with Whip of Erebos in play, every time you're attritioning out your opponent's removal and putting some more stuff in the graveyard, it's going to be really good for you long term. I know that Linde didn't have any big hits there, but that's still 2 lands he's passed. And at this point, you know, Siege Rhinos, Hornet Queens, Soul of Innistrad, they're all huge draws.
And you can't be too upset with another Thoughtseize, too.
No.
Escalante going to take a look at some things here. Figure out what to do this turn as we are underneath 14 minutes. It looks like it's time to go delving.
And Roby eschewing the line of play that Linde showed earlier of waiting until you have 5 mana for your Tassiker. In case it just dies, you at least come away with something. And it looks like Lindy's downfall is going to line up very nicely with this Tassiker on the other side of the table.
Absolutely. There is Tassiker. As you mentioned, this downfall is going to line up beautifully because no advantage gained.
Exactly.
Linde will draw. It's a forest. He'll play that forest. Has the opportunity this turn to activate Whip, get back Tassiger. Coming to the red zone here for 4, which means he'll also gain 4 life. So Escalante is going to go down to 12. Linde go up to 21, and now make a Tassiger activation. Again, this is just small card advantage, nothing crazy. But you can't be too unhappy. Commune with the Gods and Temple of Malady are turned over here.
Yeah, an unfortunate mill there for Linde, as I'm sure Commune with the Gods is essentially the card he's looking for in this spot. But
yeah.
Still just trying to give himself the most opportunities possible.
I'm a little surprised to see that.
Wow.
Giving Commune with the Gods back. I think Hero's Downfall, if I'm in Escalante situation, this card I'd rather have in my opponent's hand.
With no long-term answer in hand to Whip of Erebos, it seems like Commune is really, really dangerous.
Here's a Thoughtseize. We'll see the Commune along with the Thoughtseize and then a Hero's Downfall. And now he'll give away the Commune, so maybe correcting a mistake there.
Yeah.
The draw step here for Linde, well, that's a big one. It's a Satyr Wayfinder, which means it's going to turn over a couple of cards. Nissa's 1, Thoughtseize is 2, Courser is 3, Satyr Wayfinder is 4. So no lands there, but starting to fill up that graveyard.
Yeah, this is not too bad. He gets another Wayfinder back, and that's 4 more cards in the graveyard.
So now here is a Whip activation. You mentioned it'll bring back a Wayfinder, so we'll take a look at 4 more cards. Urborg is 1, Wayfinder is 2, Nissa is 3, Sansep Citadel is 4. He can take one of those lands with him, and he will go with the Sansep Citadel. It's time to get in the red zone for 1. Now here's a Bile-Blight. That'll take care of both of them.
But Linde not even upset about that.
Not at all.
Another Wayfinder in the graveyard for him to keep churning.
Citadel will come in, and we'll head back Escalante's way. Escalante going to draw a card. And all you can do is pass the turn back. Another copy of Ugin.
Hand getting a little expensive over there.
You're not wrong.
This and more expert commentary to come.
Absolutely. Got 18 rounds of it. Going to turn over a couple of cards here. Will Linde, 2 Siege Rhinos and a Nissa will go to the graveyard. Sansep Citadel will go into hand. Here's an attack for 1. Escalante is going to go down to 9. Linde will go up to 21. Important thing to keep in mind here, the draw step for Linde this turn was the card that helped him win game number 1. Copy of Soul of Innistrad.
Yeah, which is a huge insurance policy in case Roby draws something like Soul-Tie Charmer or some other answer to Whip of Erebos, because Linde's hand does not have a lot going on besides that, so Soul is a big draw.
Hero's Downfall the draw and a very quick passing of the turn back Linde's way. Tasker the draw here from him, and now starting to look like a runaway. The activation of Whip is going to get back a Siege Rhino. Trigger Escalante will go down to 6. Linde will go up to 24.
If you aren't doing something either very aggressive or extremely powerful, you cannot weather the storm of an unchecked Whip of Barabos. It's a card we've seen less and less of in Standard over the last, let's say 3 months. But in games like this, if you can't kill it, forget about it.
Soul Innistrad will come down now. Treasure Cruise looks to be the draw step here for Escalante, and he's going to extend the hand. It's too much to overcome as Matt Linde, former Pro Tour national champion, is off to a great start so far this weekend. He wins round number 1 against Roby Escalante. Abzan Reanimator will take care of Sultai Control. Good start for the man who apparently likes some Sriracha with his shirt there.
And a very impressive display there of the merits of that deck, because the Abzan Reanimator deck has sort of fallen off to the wayside a little bit. You see the Abzan decks typically at this point moving to cards like End Hostilities, becoming more of a control deck. And I think that if Linde had that kind of infrastructure, that this matchup would have been a disaster. You saw game 1, the most potent cards in his deck were Whip of Erebos and Soul of Innistrad. Post-board, Whip of Erebos again was the solution. And I think that if he was just a conventional Abzan, the mid-range control deck, the build that we see so much of, I think that Robbie's Dig Through Times and Treasure Cruises would have been unbeatable. But he had something in his deck of the power level of those card drawers once the game stalled out. He played very well to set them up, and I think got out of a pretty tough matchup game 1.